ABC 6 News presents the Rochester City Sales Tax Debate in partnership with the League of Women Voters and RCTC.
The panelists have drawn numbers to determine the order in which they will speak, and Rochester Cost will begin with their opening statements. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for being here and being interested in this important topic. A couple of important things I want to tell you. Number one, I do love Rochester. And number two, I have supported in the past the local option sales tax for Rochester when it was applied to critical regional needs that are above and beyond the normal expenses for a city. Given that, I've examined where we've come. And as a matter of fact, I think even in the latter parts of this 30 years for this temporary tax, we began to drift a bit, I think, from that principle. And when I look at the proposal that we're going to vote on in November, I think we've drifted so far that I'm going to vote no, and I hope that you'll consider voting no as well. And let me give you sort of three structural reasons why I think that's the right choice. Number one, the proposal is too big. Number two, the proposal is too broad. And number three, the proposal is too vague. On the bigness side, it's $139.5 million, which is a big number in my opinion from the beginning, but it will be more than that when you include the cost of bonding and interest. So it could be as much as $200 million. Too big. Too broad. Instead of being focused, 10 major project areas. That's too broad. Too vague. If you look inside those 10, you'll find oftentimes almost no definition really of any specifics of what it would be. Too big, too broad, too vague. I think it's time that we consider ending a 30-year temporary tax and vote no in November.
Thank you. Common sense?
This is about a vision for our future, a planned one. Wise leadership in the past, with the overwhelming support of the community, determined that rather than sitting back and letting the future happen to us in some haphazard way, they would reach out and create the opportunities for conditions and success. The implementation of a local sales tax has met some very important needs in this growing and maturing community. From the flood control to water quality, a fire station, the library expansion of the Mayo Civic Center, city and county transportation projects including the Highway 52 rebuild, the government center, the city's portion of that, and higher education including academic and recreational facilities at the RCTC campus and bringing the University of Minnesota here to Rochester. The use of the local sales tax has contributed mightily to the quality of life assets important to this wonderful city and region. 2 years ago, a citizens committee, under the direction and leadership of your elected citizen representatives, the City Council, determined that 10 projects were important, that they provided sustainability and value to the future of this community, and should be a part of an effort to renew our local sales tax, where 100% of the revenue stays here and up to 50% of it is paid by visitors to our community. A vote in support of this renewal is a vote for public safety, for our seniors and our youth, for city and county transportation projects, downtown infrastructure improvements, expansion of the University of Minnesota, establishment of a secondary vocational area attached to the Heinz Center, improvement of recreational facilities, and jobs and economic development. It's also a vote for minimizing property tax increases. We are here today because of the broad shoulders and vision of those who came before us. I believe that in future decades, with the renewal of our local sales tax, our children and their children, future generations will say the same thing about us. This is our chance to mold part of that vision for the future of our community, to create a legacy for that future. A yes vote to renew our local sales tax will ensure that happening.
Thank you. And now we'll go on to questions from our moderators, and we'll begin with common sense.
How do you assess the usage of the temporary half-cent sales tax since it began in 1983, such as flood control, higher education, Highway 52 improvements? Who benefited from these projects and how?
The community benefited from these projects. They can see the results of this every day. The city has done a masterful job in coordinating these projects being put into effect. Whenever anybody drives on Broadway and they see Fire Station 1, number one, they had a part in building that. When they cross over the bridges on the river, they had a part in creating that flood control dynamic so that what happened in the early July day of 1978 wouldn't happen again. When they drive on Highway 52, they know they contributed $10 to $12 million of that $252 million project out of local sales tax and not off of their property taxes. When they visit the new library, anybody who's moved here in the last 10 years thinks the library has always looked like that. Those of us who have lived here longer know that that is not the case. And it goes on and on of a variety of projects that have contributed to the quality of life assets in this community.
Thank you. Rochester Cost?
As I said in my introduction, really, I have supported in the past. I think people that are working, that believe this is time to end the temporary tax would tell you the same thing. And the examples that are given about flood control, the example of the University of Minnesota campus downtown, those kinds of things are a prime example of exactly what I said. That is, projects that are of critical regional need that are above and beyond the normal call of a city. However, what's not talked about, frankly, are some of the places where we've slipped into projects that are much more of a local kind of nature. And we haven't taken kind of issues. The individual projects even that are included here may individually have merit, but the question is, what's the right way to pay for them?
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals?
I'd like to make a comment. People say this is temporary. It is. It is. But ask any politician who's elected to office. They're temporary in that office as long as the voters put them in there and continue to re-elect them. But what so often happens is that people look at have they served the purpose for which they went into that office? Have they been transparent? Have they been honest? Have they been above board? Have they met the needs of their constituents? If they have, what happens? They're re-elected. And I believe that we have shown that this sales tax in the past deserves that re-election or renewal based upon its past.
Any other rebuttal?
You want to say? Well, I guess we're still back to the point, really, that and I think on a national, on a state, and on local levels, really, this kind of thinking is what's gotten us in trouble. That the way you have to win things is you have to spend more and more, that you have to add to your spending. And I think it's time to change that. We can't afford as a country really to continue to have the notion that the way you do things is always having to add more. We are a city that has considerable resources and we have to prioritize, and if these kinds of projects are a priority, then we should do it within those and live within our means.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our second question will begin with Rochester Cost.
As you review the budgeted amounts for the items included in the tax, are the line items reasonable estimates for the projects? Should the amount of $139.5 million be revised to make the tax more palatable?
Well, excuse me, let's not forget that when we were going through this process, the City Council initially requested $160 million. It was the legislature that pared it down. In regards to your question, the answer to that is no. Most of the projects in here are simply just project titles. They're not actually identified projects. So spending this money gives unyielding power to the City Council because they're not being accountable to the taxpayer. It says transportation. Anything can qualify as transportation, but yet they want $30 million for it. Well, you haven't come to the taxpayers telling us why you need this. You've just given us broad-based project headlines. Well, I think the taxpayers are tired of saying trust us, going through the trust us process. And these projects aren't defined. They haven't been defined. They're not specific. And so no, the answer to that is no. They have not met the burden of proof to tell us exactly how this money will be spent. And that's across the legislation and on the ballot itself.
Thank you. Common sense?
We believe that as you look specifically, for example, to transportation, they are itemized. Highway 52 and 65th Street interchanges, Northwest Transportation Corridor Preservation, Highway 52 and County 22 interchange, and on it goes. These projects have been well thought out and well developed, and they've been developed and thought out locally, and they will be implemented locally. The City Council has a very real role, and I believe the closer that government is to the people, the better the services are. We have proven over and over again that these projects, whether it be transportation, whether it be public safety, whether it be supporting our senior citizens and our students, we have shown over and over again a high regard for the constituents of the city, and ultimately the City Council gets to make that decision, and we think they should. And if these projects are not meritorious, they won't fund them. These have been well thought out, well developed, and I don't want to put my future in the state of Minnesota or the United States of America necessarily. I'll count on it locally. And I think this has been very well developed and very well thought out. Thank you.
Are there any rebuttals?
Yeah, just a quick one, really. I think the question said, are the estimates right for each of them? And I'm going to suggest that they probably are. I don't know. I mean, I think give credit for the citizens group that did some really good work. I think the citizens group is commendable. I just think they had the wrong charge. To think that it's got to be, if this would have been about a $55 million instead of what it is, and if it would have been very focused on those things that are above and beyond the call of a normal city, we wouldn't be having this debate tonight.
Thank you. Anything further?
We are a growing and maturing community. We're very fortunate. We're very unique, not only in the state of Minnesota, but in the whole United States. Not only do we have the economic engine of the state of Minnesota right here in our community, but we also have millions of visitors who come here and can help us take care of a lot of these infrastructure needs. Specifics, item number one is public safety, and has to do with a fire station and a police precinct station in Northeast Rochester for $8 million. I don't know how you can get more specific than that. There's no vagueness to these.
I think we'll have to hold it. Our next question will be first answered by common sense.
Public safety and infrastructure in the community is a major part of this reauthorization usage. If these items are important to you, how do you propose that Olmsted County will cover these costs if the tax is not renewed? How will our property taxes be affected by renewing or ending the tax?
One example, you mentioned Olmsted County. I had a conversation with the head of Public Works in Olmsted County. Their first priority in the transportation, their very first priority is the rebuilding of 2nd Street Southwest from Highway 52 west to the Country Club. Olmsted County is going to get $17 million of transportation dollars out of this. A lot of people don't realize when they drive on West Circle Drive, East Circle Drive, 37th Street, or 2nd Street Southwest, those are county highways. They need to fix 2nd Street Southwest infrastructure-wise and pavement-wise. And they very clearly said they are going to have to do that regardless. That would go on our Olmsted County property taxes.
Rochester Cost?
Well, I think the issue of property taxes is a funny one, and I think that people need to understand that voting yes for this won't stop your property taxes from increasing. The state of Minnesota had an average property tax increase of less than 1% nationwide or statewide. In 2012, Rochester, the city of Rochester, increased your property taxes 4.5%. That's 5 times the state average. Oh, and let's not forget, they were still collecting the city sales tax of an average of over $9 million a year. And they've already proposed an additional 5% increase this coming year. So, does it affect the property taxes? No, because the city of Rochester is continuing to raise them regardless of this tax. And they're skirting their responsibilities to fund projects like public safety by trying to reissue a sales tax that has gone on far too long.
Thank you. Do we have any rebuttals?
I would just say that the sales tax, as defined, as outlined here, and the continuation of it will make a very real difference in our lives. And business owners, for example, own 26% of the property in this community, and we pay 40% of the property taxes. And let me just be clear about this. We believe very strongly that if this local option sales tax is not continued, that we will in fact see additional tax increases on the property tax. We believe that. We support this proposal.
And a rebuttal?
But the question, the point is that they don't know that. And we're going to see a property tax increase regardless. History has shown us that. And to say that the Rochester Chamber supports this, when the Minnesota State Chambers come out against local option sales taxes, NFIB has come out against them, National Association of the Self-Employed have come out against them, I think is not only irresponsible for the business community, but it is really just not factual.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Rochester Cost.
What is the process for allocating the funds we would get from the extension? Where is the transparency in the use of the funds? And what if one project goes way over budget, or if the project gets canceled altogether?
I'll do my best to answer that. I think that would be the proponents answering that kind of thing. But I think that one's probably fairly clear. In the ultimate, the City Council has the responsibility of supervising where the spending is. But what I think, I don't have any issues with that. What I have issues with is creating 10 slush funds of relatively undefined content and giving the right to do that. And I, along with my colleague, I'm so afraid that history has shown that extra spending doesn't necessarily do anything to reduce the load of property taxes. We are a fairly well, we're doing okay as a city, and we collect sufficient property taxes to live within our means. And so it's not so much an issue of what the process would be. That's theoretically fine, but practically we're still too big, too broad, and too vague.
Thank you. Common sense?
The city has been very transparent in its past use of the sales tax dollars. It's used for capital investment and reinvestment projects. You go to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth, and parts of theirs, and in Duluth particularly, a significant amount of it goes into the general fund. That has not happened here, and it's not proposed that that happens. The transparency of it is, you can, number one, you can see the results, and number two, the city has been very clear that for an item such as public safety, the first one, they're going to have a line item account. Any citizen at any time can see the revenue, which is the $8 million, and the expenses, exactly what that has been spent for. I've had many conversations with city staff on this, and there is absolutely no question in my mind of their commitment to transparency. We see the results of these projects in this community, and they've been valid results, good results, in leading us into the future.
Thank you. Do we have a rebuttal?
Well, just a quick one, really. A lot of us were a bit surprised when we started seeing the construction of a very expensive bridge across Highway 14. I was told don't sweat it because that's coming from sales tax revenue. I don't know about the accountability because I think there's so much that goes on and it's so vague, and the fact that these individual project areas are so vague, you can almost do anything. I mean, it almost was an open door to have additional revenue, to spend additional money, and this is going to be a significant tax increase over this next 15 to 20 years.
Further rebuttal?
I would just add one thing, that one of those, sometimes these things, some people say, the opponents, that they're not clearly defined. The University of Minnesota Rochester is one of those examples that was not clearly defined. We knew the need was out there, and the City Council understood that. And we set up that funding, but we understood that that funding would not be spent unless the University of Minnesota Rochester had a plan for it, and the council didn't authorize it without that plan. So we did set it aside. It has given us a higher educational opportunity here we would have never had without the local option sales tax in the past, and as we grow forward in education tomorrow.
Thank you. Our final moderator question will go to Common Sense first.
The renewal places much of the burden of the tax on visitors to Rochester, not just the residents of Olmsted County. Now, these visitors in turn utilize much of the infrastructure of the community. How does this affect your position on the tax, especially as it compares to other taxes we pay, such as property tax?
I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're looking for. Could you repeat that, please?
Of course. So with this reauthorization plan, it puts a burden on visitors in Rochester, not just the residents. How does this affect your position on the tax, especially as it compares to other taxes we pay just like property taxes?
Well, you know, we're in a very unique and fortunate position where we have a lot of visitors. Not only do they come here to use the services of our community, the Mayo Clinic in particular, but they come visit IBM and maybe other businesses within our community. But we have a lot of people who come here and work each day and buy goods and services within our community each day. And my earlier comment in my opening was the fact that up to 50% of the revenue that we receive from this local sales tax comes from visitors to our community. I think that based upon from what I'm hearing as I go out and have conversations with group, that they are contributing to supporting the infrastructure of our community. I know there are a lot of visitors, for example, who go over and use the library. They may use some public safety services within our community. They drive on our roads and bridges, and so therefore they are helping to support those infrastructure needs within our community, and I think this has been a real positive kind of experience for the community.
Thank you. Rochester Cost?
Well, let me stand a little bit in defense of the people that come into Rochester and are sometimes characterized as taking advantage of our services. Remember, these people spend money here. The visitors from out of state, for example, eat in our restaurants, stay in our hotels, and those restaurants, those hotels, the places they buy products, all pay real estate taxes. As a matter of fact, I think John Wade said that the major part of real estate taxes come from commercial. So it is their business, really, that is helping our base in terms of real estate tax. The people who come into Rochester, and there's over 30,000 a day come in, they come in here, they provide a valuable resource. What is it? Labor. They work hard, they provide labor for the industries that are here. The real estate taxes from those industries stay in Rochester. The people go home to their communities, and not a penny follows them. I think it's unfair at times to characterize those people as not paying their fair share. They pay their fair share in direct and indirect kinds of ways. I also think, by the way, that there's no excuse for people outside of Rochester who might be negative. So it's a win-win. But let's not call these people out for not doing their share.
Thank you.
Rebuttal?
I would just say we would never call them out. They are our neighbors, and without good neighbors, we couldn't make this community work. So we are very clear that we support our neighborhood. Not only do we support them, but for the first time, we put $5 million into the 139.5 for neighboring communities, for economic development projects that would help them. We understand that strong neighbors make for a strong community, and this proposal reflects that respect as well.
Any further rebuttal?
Well, just a comment. The $5 million was not something that was in the proposal coming from Rochester. That is an action that was taken in the state legislature, and it may seem like we were being generous, but I think we're just a product of legislative action.
Thank you. Now we'll address some questions that we've received from the audience. Our first question from the audience will go to Rochester Cost. What exactly is a destination medical center, and why should the citizens pay for it?
That's an outstanding question, actually. It's a concept that hasn't been defined. You know, the proponents of this are talking about transparency. Well, we've got $20 million for destination medical community. We've got a few photos and a link on their website that went to Mayo Clinic until they were identified about it, and then they switched it to John Wade. They haven't identified this project. They've said, Jerry Williams has said, and I have it here in a written statement, that Mayo is going to invest $250 million into Rochester. Well, why do they need $20 million from us? They have not defined this project. Mayo Clinic is leading this project, which, Lord knows, if Mayo Clinic wants to do something, they have all the education and ingenuity to do it better than our local government certainly can. And I think just giving them tax money, or just issuing tax money for something that, again, has not been defined. That's the important thing here, friends, is that this has not been defined. It's a theory, it's a dream, but they need $20 million for it. That's a little irresponsible.
There's nothing irresponsible about creating the world's premier destination medical community. This $20 million does not go to Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is not asking for $20 million. This is a community portion related to infrastructure, related to one of the jewels, the economic jewels of the United States of America. Over $9 billion a year in economic output to the state of Minnesota. When we start talking about an organization that's going to invest possibly $400 million a year in capital improvements here, and we look at the infrastructure parts of creating that piece, the community portion of that at $20 million, I know $20 million is a lot of money, but I will never apologize for the continued growth and development of Mayo Clinic and our role in helping make that happen.
A rebuttal?
Yes. Nobody is saying that we do not support Mayo Clinic's efforts in this to turn Rochester into a premier medical community. What we are saying is that, once again, this $20 million in the sales tax has been not defined. John just said infrastructure. Well, I've got a whole presentation here, and it doesn't mention a single thing about infrastructure. It shows us pictures, it walks us through the day of the life of a potential client or patient at Mayo Clinic, and says because of that we need $20 million from the taxpayers. This isn't the case.
Any rebuttal?
When the University of Minnesota Rochester came here, and the city put up some dollars for that higher education out of the local sales tax, as was pointed out, that wasn't fully defined either, but look what we've got. When Highway 52 was built, that was a design-build process. We didn't ask them to have every little piece identified before that was built. That was a design-build. There's a good plan out there. Mayo Clinic is going to be putting that kind of investment in this community. The infrastructure support from this city is very important. It's going to make it better for us who live here as well as those who visit us.
Thank you. This next audience question is addressed to Common Sense First. You've talked to many community groups about the sales tax. What was the most common question or concern you get related to the sales tax?
I've spoken to a lot of groups about the sales tax, and after I've talked with them about the past projects, and I've talked with them in detail about future projects going forward, the number one question that I get is, why would anybody oppose this? Very frankly, that's the number one question I get, is why would anybody oppose this? And I heard that this morning at a group, and I heard that at noon at a group, and I heard that later on this afternoon at a group. It's a consistent message out there.
Thank you.
Rochester Cost?
Interesting that the question that I hear when present is, why would anybody want to pass this? So I think each of us, of course, when we present a different kind of perspective, and the audience is hearing that and getting educated. By the way, that's okay. I mean, I hope the reason you're here tonight is to get educated as much as you possibly can. We need to understand this, and so we vote as intelligently as we possibly can. There's things that ring in my ears that just concern me, and I think it is somewhat of a reflection of government's out of control. The notion of trust me, the notion of invest. I mean, those are nice. They're nice words. I mean, nobody can fight that. But you've got to get down to the hard tax, really. We can be a welcoming community. Matter of fact, if you read the letters to the editor, people who come here often say how wonderful people in Rochester are, of welcoming them and making them feel welcome, helping them around. We're already a destination medical center with a lot of good people. I don't know that we need to spend $20 million to get better at it.
Thank you. Rebuttal.
The real issue here is, what do we see our future? What's the vision of our future going forward? We believe that these projects provide the sustainability and value to create that legacy going forward for our community and for the generations who are going to follow us.
Thank you. Cost, would you just like to say something?
You know, a lot of these projects here have been put in place to build a constituency. Everyone's got a little skin in the game when they're talking about transportation or a senior center or a destination medical community. But if you support a regional public safety center, that's great. So do I, so does Fran, so does our group. But do we need to spend $200 million to get an $8 million project the city should already do out of its own budget? These are the types of things that we're running into with this sales tax. And again, the vagueness of these projects. If it's a great plan, John, why haven't you shown the taxpayers the details of that plan? It's not a great plan because it's an idea.
Did you miss the point about the University of Minnesota Rochester and how that $8 million was set up and that we didn't know exactly what their plans are?
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. We want to stick by the rules. And you had to stop there. So we'll go to the next question, and hopefully you'll get to your response in your closing statements. This next question from the audience will begin with Rochester Cost. Could you please explain the shared tax that goes to surrounding communities?
I think I mentioned before, the proposal that was passed by the legislature, and we went back and forth, it was proposed to the legislature to be $160 million. The legislature chose to pare it down, and in the course of the negotiations decided that there ought to be something shared with the communities in the area, and so carved out $5 million of the economic development and said this proposal will be sent back to Rochester for passage, but it will include $5 million for the communities. And it was up, if I understand it, was up to Rochester to come up with a scheme of how that's actually distributed.
Common sense?
I would just say about that $5 million, I know that Chairman Greg Davids of the Tax Committee was very supportive of that $5 million. Candidly, we proposed it. We believe that that $5 million would be great for our neighbors, would be able to further develop our neighboring communities because we want them to be strong, and that's why that amount of money was put in there. We believe in our neighbors. We believe that they can make good investment choices as well, and that's why that $5 million is there.
And a rebuttal?
Well, the only thing I'd say, think about spreading $5 million across our whole region, and think about how much there really will be. And I don't think it's going to move the ball forward very much by doing it. It's nice. It's a nice token kind of thing. But don't get too excited if you live in Stewartville or Byron or Orinoco, because by the time you spread that, it spreads pretty thin.
And add the rebuttal?
By legislation, that $5 million is going to be divided up amongst 17 area communities for economic development purposes. Those cities that take those dollars must follow the state guidelines on what economic development is. For example, a community like Pine Island is going to pick up approximately in the area of $350,000 for economic development within that community. The stronger our neighbors are, the stronger we're going to be. It allows us to be more of an inclusive as opposed to an exclusive city. And I believe there's a lot of strength in us working together.
Thank you. The next audience question is directed towards common sense. You can start first. Define the details of what the $10 million for the Economic Development Fund is.
I've just defined part of it, because that $10 million in economic development, it's the last piece on the ballot. $5 million, first $5 million is going to go through the Rochester Area Economic Development Incorporated with the partnership of the city to reinvest in businesses who want to come here and provide jobs and economic development in our community. You look across the country, and when you see successful communities, one of the main things, one of the common denominators you see with those successful communities is those communities are willing to reinvest in themselves. This is a chance to reinvest in our community for that jobs and economic development. The second part of that $10 million, the $5 million, is, as I just pointed out, it goes to 17 area communities.
Thank you. Rochester Cost?
Sure. So let me get this straight. The first $5 million is going to go to development within the community for businesses that are thinking of coming to Rochester. Let me tell you what, folks, I'm a business owner, and I would have come to Rochester whether I got this money or not. Oh, wait, I did. People are going to come here, businesses are going to start here, regardless if they get $5 million in economic development selected by a government-appointed group. Does anybody in here remember Solyndra? How'd that work out for us? Okay? This idea that we're going to just invest $5 million and all these businesses are going to come to the community, it's a pure canard. It's not going to happen. If businesses want to start here, they're going to start here. If they want to grow here, they're going to grow here. And if they don't, they won't. But just to say that a $5 million carrot is going to create an economic boom with economic development in the community is really just, it's nonsensical.
Nonsensical is a lack of knowledge. And when you look at the history of Rochester Area Economic Development, Inc., which is made up of both private and public sector organizations, that's the same organization that helped fund and developed PEMSTAR here. And a long list of companies, and it's not just about recruiting companies here, it is about growing and expanding companies here. And we That's less, by the way, of your home city, Austin, Minnesota. That's less in economic development money than Austin spends. We believe that this will only allow us to remain competitive and to help both existing as well as help other businesses from outside of the area develop, grow, and prosper here.
Thank you. Rochester Cost, do you have a rebuttal? Okay.
Okay. The next question will begin with Rochester Cost. Wasn't this a temporary tax, and when will it end?
I think I wrote a column for those of you who read it, and the opening of the column was, when does a temporary tax ever end? And my response was, never, unless the people decide to end it. And that's the situation we are here. This will never end unless we, the people, and we don't get very many chances to say enough is enough, that 30 years of temporary tax is long enough, and this is an opportunity for us to say. Because I predict from a governmental point of view the appetite to spend. Remember, when the appeal went out, there were something like 50-some projects that came in wanting a piece of the trough. There was over $400 million requests. The appetite for additional investment, which has become kind of a code word for spending more money in the governmental level, is almost limitless. And I worry sometimes about if we just let ourselves be drawn in by how things sound good, we forget the kind of trouble that our state, our nation, and sometimes our cities are with fulfilling that appetite.
Common sense?
The real issue here is, has that temporary tax, it is temporary until the next election, has that temporary tax brought value to the community? We believe, our group believes very strongly, that the temporary tax, the sales tax, the local sales tax has brought value to this community to provide support in a variety of ways for a maturing and growing community as we are. My analogy earlier was to the politician. They're temporary until the next election. If they're serving your needs, if they're doing what you expect them to do, what do you typically do? You re-elect them. We believe that the projects in the past that this sales tax has supported have been valuable for this community, and that it deserves re-election or renewing on November 6th.
And a rebuttal?
Well, I hope that you've paid attention on a national and state and other kinds of levels, because I hope that we don't keep re-electing people because of the pork they bring home or the earmarking that they're a part of. We have to have a new paradigm in terms of the control, the restraint, the live within means kind of responsibilities that we have at all governmental levels. Just because it sounds good doesn't mean that necessarily it has to be done through the taxpayers. Remember, I think the Boys and Girls Club was one of the things that was going to be considered, and it didn't get in. But what happened? The Boys and Girls Club found a way to get the job done, and now they own it, and it's terrific.
Rebuttal.
I'd just say that there are a number of projects. I think Fran makes a very good point, that there were over $400 million in requests. I think that shows how thoughtful not only the City Council was, but the committee that looked at every one of these requests carefully and looked to make sure there was a match, looked to make sure that they made indeed sense. And from that, we are now at 139.5. Is that a lot of money? You're darn right, it's a lot of money, but it's a lot of investment as well. But it's a long way from $400 million. And I'll put up the people of Rochester any day against the spenders in St. Paul or Washington, any day, anyhow.
Thank you. This next audience question will go to you, Common Sense first. If the tax is not passed, will the city still proceed with all of the projects? Why or why not?
That's going to be up to the City Council, the elected citizen representatives of this community. There are a lot of things that are going to have to be done ongoing for this maturing and growing community as we work into the future. You know, it took a real vision many, many years ago under former mayors Smetka and Hazama and City Council leadership to be visionary in looking ahead, not only in the flood control work, but the water quality work, which not only saved from a health standpoint in 43 neighborhoods and 1,200 residences, almost 1,500 residences, that protected our groundwater supply. It takes that vision in looking ahead, and it's going to be up to the City Council in looking ahead to what are the kinds of things they want to do. There are things that are going to have to be done in this community going forward into the future and carrying out and living through that vision of the future that I think is so dynamic and so important.
Thank you. Rochester Cost?
Sure. On April 17th of this year, Heather Carlson wrote an article in which John Wade was quoted as saying, well, if you don't give us our money, we're still going to do $60+ million of this anyway. Well, you know, friends, fellow citizens of Rochester, I have a real hard time when somebody gives me the ultimatum with my own money. I have a real hard time being leveraged against my own interests. If they're going to do these projects, the $60 million, then do them. You don't need a sales tax to do it, as evident by the chamber president. So once again, they're making the case that not all of this needs to be done. 60 million of it is critical, then let's do that. We don't need a $200 million tax for 20 years to do $60 million worth of projects.
I can assure you I didn't say it to Heather with quite that attitude. We know that there's going to have to be continued investment in this community, and it really is looking at how we're going to get there and what mechanisms are going to make that possible. Do I believe that some of these projects are going to have to take place regardless? I do. Do I think that those will wind up on the property tax rolls? I do. Do I know who pays those property taxes? I do. So while we don't know what will and what ultimately won't, there's a pretty good chance some of these projects are going to get done, and there's a very good chance they're going to wind up on your property taxes. And for those who talk a good game about caring a lot about property taxes or taxes overall, this is a tremendous bargain for the community of Rochester.
Thank you. Rebuttal.
Yeah, actually, John, you are right in one thing. You didn't say it to Heather, you said it directly to me, and Heather was quoting you as you were saying it. The question really, though, comes down to, and John just alluded to it, is again, whether you vote for this and pass it or you don't and say no to it, your property taxes are going to skyrocket. They're already 5 times the state average. They're already proposing, 2 city council members proposed a 6.25% tax increase not too long ago. And they've settled on 5, at least for the moment. So this whole concept that we need a slush fund to fund wish list projects for $60 million or for $139.5 million when they're already going to do 60 is irresponsible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question from the audience will begin with Rochester Cost. This is a special tax that is earmarked for certain projects. Why can't these projects compete on their own right rather than having a special tax?
Well, it sounds like the questioner is answering the question. Because that's what I've said, I think, a few times, is it's not necessarily about any of these projects being bad things. It's a matter of what's the precedent? Is this a critical regional need above and beyond the responsibilities of a city? And when you put it in that context, then you're forced to do what we ought to do, and that's prioritize. And so I think that's what this comes down to, really, is there will be things that will happen. I gave you an example of something that might have been included but wasn't, and by golly, inventive people found another way to do it, a la the Boys Club. The other kinds of things, when we're talking about in general, our streets, those kinds of things, we pay hefty sales taxes. We have a growing city where the real estate continues to grow and the revenue continues to grow, and that means that we have an opportunity to continue to invest, but let's do it within our means.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Common sense.
We, as a community, going forward, have these various needs that are out there that are going to need to be addressed, from public safety, from taking care of our seniors. You know, they say the true measure of a society is how well it takes care of its seniors and its youth. There's been some concern about, well, the fact that this partnership is in there with the senior center as an example. But what do we want to say? What message do we want to send to our seniors and our youth when part of this project is remodeling the recreation center and providing an opportunity for our seniors whose lifestyles are changing to experience not only the program improvements but the health and wellness improvements? There are a variety of communities out and around us who provide community settings for their seniors. And they go from Albert Lee, that has a per capita cost of $5.27, to Farmington at $12.74. Winona spends $16.31 per capita to seniors. Rochester spends 70 cents. And look what we've had, and look what we've got, and moving ahead. So these are worthwhile kinds of projects for our community.
A rebuttal?
Well, there you go again, Jerry, not telling the whole truth. The fact is that the citizens of Rochester subsidize the senior center, the building, the rent, at a tune of $750,000 a year. All right, let me put that in perspective for you. That's $7.50 per person in the city of Rochester towards the senior center. We also give them an additional $90,000 worth of operating costs. So if you add up those two together, that breaks down to under $8.50 per person in Rochester that we give to the senior center. Now, we're not saying the senior center isn't a good project. We're not saying that it shouldn't be done. What we're saying is that if they're going to do it, they can fundraise themselves to get it done.
If we understood the way the Senior Citizen Center here works, it is both publicly and privately funded. And I'll tell you something, I don't know what kind of community you're looking for or looking to have, but I'd spend a lot more than $8 on a senior citizen. And I think this is a wonderful use of our community's resources to help all of our seniors, now and in the future.
Thank you. Now, this next question is going to be common sense first. Are these projects completely paid for with the amount listed on the line item? So,
Are we what?
are these projects completely paid for with the amount listed?
To the best of our knowledge, as a committee when we met, and the people who came forth and provided reams and reams of information, they're going to have to be, because there's $8 million for a public safety center in there, and that's all there is. The legislation is very clear. You can't shift dollars from one category to the next. There's $6.5 million in there to add a secondary vocational center onto the Heinz Center. That's all there is. The University of Minnesota has $14 million. $10 million they're going to leverage into a $60 million building on First Avenue Southwest, and the other $4 million are going to be used for complementary facilities to support the University of Minnesota. That's all there is. There is not shifting of dollars from one category to the next. It is very clear. On transportation, there's $30 million for the city and $17 million for the county. That's all there is. And again, we have the oversight from the City Council watching that.
Thank you. Rochester Cost?
I worry, frankly, about that question. I know, for example, it was given about the University of Minnesota counting on the match. Well, we counted on bonding on other kinds of things. And, for example, you saw the news today that the wishes for the Civic Center didn't come true. There is no guarantee. I've been a part of the bonding process, so there's no guarantee about those matches where they're being counted on. That's one part. The other part that I worry almost more about, frankly, is maintenance dollars and operational dollars. We subsidize our current Civic Center to the tune of several $100,000. I know the Senior Center has really struggled financially, and I worry, will the Senior Center be able to support the operating and maintenance costs of that facility once it's built? So that's a factor that's oftentimes, and many times, the taxpayer has been stuck with the bill when the maintenance costs and the operational costs aren't covered.
Thank you. A rebuttal?
I would just say, whether you agree or not with what the governor's office did related to the expansion of the Mayo Civic Center, which has nothing to do with the sales tax, I think one thing it does show me is this, that we can only count on what we can do in our own community. This was designed here, it will be implemented here, and the benefit will be here.
Thank you. A rebuttal?
Well, just quick, I mean, I didn't mention the $10 million, $50 million match. I was just going from what was said by the common sense people. If they're counting on that as a part of the program, I'm just worried, can you really depend on it to happen? That's all.
Thank you.
All right. This question will be directed towards Rochester Cost first. If the continuation of the sales tax is passed, will the proposed hotel and lodging tax increase from 11.375 to over 14%? Will that be dropped?
Well, I'll throw out an answer because I've been trying to keep educated on. I believe, and John can probably correct me, that those are completely separate. The sales tax proposal is funding the things we've talked about. The lodging tax was all about funding the debt responsibilities, the match for the city, for the Civic Center. I think that's correct.
Exactly. Fran's correct. They're not related.
Okay.
Okay, this will be our last question for the evening from the audience. This is going to be directed toward common sense.
Yes.
Common sense. If one does not vote on this question come November, is it counted as a no vote, or is the outcome determined by actual votes, yes or no?
It does not count as a no vote. That's only on constitutional amendments. This is just a straight up person with the most votes wins.
Thank you.
That was a pretty...
I just wanted you to know that I agree.
Thank you.
All right, I will add one, since that was so quick, we'll add one question to this, and we'll begin with Rochester cost. This is regarding regional public safety and the 911 dispatch. Do we need one for the city and one for the county?
Well, I think the city and the county both have individual needs, and I think no one on this panel here or anyone in the audience would argue with improved public safety. But the larger question comes to is, do we need to spend $200 million over the course of 20 years to get an $8 million project? I would urge everyone in this room to say no. That would be like, that'd be like buying a Lexus to get a new set of tires. That doesn't make sense. We think that the city of Rochester does have emergency needs. The county does have emergency needs that need to be met, and no one in our group would oppose this project. We don't oppose this project. We just oppose the way that this tax is going to come in fruition, to be used to fund it, when we believe that this is something that should be done either through county dollars or through the city budget as a priority.
Thank you.
Common sense?
I think it's important that we separate fact from fiction. The fiction is that this is going to cost $200 million. The fact is, this is $139.5 million. Yes, there may be some bonding costs added to that over a period of time, but this becomes a pay-as-you-go system. When you put bad data in and bad assumptions in, you're going to get bad data out and bad assumptions out. The wrong data went into looking at this by whomever did it and came up with a $200 million cost. This is a pay-as-you-go system, basically. When expenses exceed revenue, yes, there may be some bonding that's done for a short period of time at an extremely low interest rate by a city that has high fiscal responsibility with bonding agencies throughout the country. It is pure fiction to believe that this is going to be a $200 million project. Totally false.
Rebuttal?
Number one, I'm not really made feel a lot better if it's 150 rather than 200. It's still a lot of money, so I'll make that statement. On the question that was asked, though, I want to throw something. It really doesn't have anything to do with the sales tax, just quickly. I'm disappointed that we don't have more cooperation and co-project between our county and our city. And to me, it was a loss when we gave up on having a combined public safety center. So, I mean, I just hope, which is not really germane to the sales tax, but I hope it's a message, though, that we do better in being able to work together.
Thank you.
We're ready to have our closing statements. Following the closing statements tonight, I will have a few announcements prior to your huge round of applause. So please hold that until we're completely done. Our closing statements will be offered within 2 minutes, and Common Sense will go first.
First, thank you very much again for the opportunity to the League, to KAAL, and to Rochester Community and Technical College. It was 30 years ago that I was here as a student, and that's about the same time we were talking about this proposal then, and I understand that a lot of people would rather not ever see a tax in this country. And I am often one of those people that would like to see certain taxes, and I can give you a whole long list that I'd like to see reduced. But one thing I know about this process is it has been fair, it has been transparent, We have looked at thoughtfully at a lot of projects that would focus on the economic development future of our community, education. Let me tell you, folks, we're going to grow some 10,000 jobs in the next 10 years. We don't have the skilled workforce to do it. That project at Heinz Center matters. It matters to all of us. And when we say it might be 139 or 150, and then I've got another person over here saying it's really 200, it goes to credibility, folks. This thing has been developed locally. It will be implemented locally. And I, frankly, in this regard, have great respect for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, the NFIB, and all kinds of other wonderful organizations. But I think we're closer to this community, and we probably have a better idea, because we listen to what's going on in this community, about how resources, valuable resources that come out of your pocket, are reinvested in this community. And I think time and time again, do we do everything right here? Absolutely not. Would I like to see more cooperation between the city and the county? That's a wonderful thing. I'd like that. But here tonight, we're here to talk about the possibility of what the future of this city is going to look like. And whether I was sitting in this room or on this dais 30 years ago as a student or today, I believe just as much that the benefits that we will see today were just as great as they were then. Because, folks, and flood control is a wonderful thing. Glad we made the investment, but our future is even brighter. And together, by voting yes for this common sense proposal, we believe we will have a better community long into the future. Thank you.
Rochester Cost?
30 years ago, we had an imminent need to pass this tax: flood control. It was a critical need to the region, and certainly a critical need to Rochester. 30 years has passed. That critical need aspect has really faded away, and now we've added more capital projects and more wish list ideas. The sales tax, unfortunately, has allowed the city the opportunity to not focus its efforts, because it's got a slush fund of cash that's being used to fund projects that they should themselves be prioritizing and funding. And I would reject any person that says that either Fran or I or anybody else that opposes this doesn't love the city of Rochester. We have a fundamentally different view of how it should be funded. And we simply believe that the people of Rochester are going to look at this and they're going to vote no. And this is why. Is because you really have a real clear choice this time. Unlike 10 years or 15 years ago or 30 years ago. It's, do you want to continue to see property tax increases of over 5 times the state average year in and year out, and pay this tax and allow the city to continue to skirt the responsibilities that they should be paying for through prioritized budgeting? Or do you want to pay this additional tax and still continue to pay higher property taxes? It's time that we as taxpayers hold our elected officials accountable. And I know we have an election coming up, but we also have an election to vote no. We also have a choice to vote no this year, and it's time that we tell the politicians in town that we've been taxed enough and we're going to vote no. So we encourage you, please go out to the polls and please vote no this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. I know I've got a lot of questions here that we didn't get to. I hope you speak to the panelists after our event tonight. But I also want to remind you that on Wednesday, September 19th, there is an event at the Rochester Public Library between 6:30 and 8:30 where you can learn more about this important issue. It's the Rochester Issues Forum, which will be held again the 19th, 6:30 to 8:30 at the Rochester Public Library. I want to remind all of you that Election Day is November 6th. I'd like to remind you that absentee voting for residents in Olmsted County has been moved, and you may submit your absentee vote at the Olmsted County Fairgrounds on 1423 3rd Avenue Southeast, just opposite Woodruff's. Thank you, panelists, for your time, for your preparation, and for your honesty tonight. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for your questions and for coming tonight.
Thank you so much.
This has been the Rochester City Sales Tax Debate, presented by ABC 6 News in partnership with the League of Women Voters and RCTC.